Hello, and thank you for joining the 2024 Smithsonian National Education Summit. My name is Tricia Edwards. I'm the Interim Director of the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service and Smithsonian Affiliations. In our office, we aim to spark learning, enjoyment, and wonder by connecting the resources of the Smithsonian to a vital network of museums and other educational and cultural organizations in every state in the nation, as well as Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and Panama. Through traveling exhibitions, public engagement initiatives, educational resources, capacity building, and professional development, we reach nearly 30 million people each year across the U.S. I'm excited to introduce you to our four invited speakers today. They're a panel of State Teachers of the Year. In a long-standing partnership with the Council of Chief State School Officers, now celebrating its 18th year, the Smithsonian has welcomed State Teachers of the Year to join us here in Washington, D.C. for professional development, and often relies on the expertise of these teachers to help inform our work in education for a national pre-K through 12 audience. In this session today, the panel will unpack the ways that they've leveraged the arts to make history relevant in their classrooms. Representing Georgia, Colorado, Hawaii, and Delaware, please help me welcome 2023 State Teachers of the Year, Michael Capito, Jimmy Day, Michael Ida, and Ashley Lockwood.
We're so thankful for you to join us and for the invitation from the Smithsonian National Education Summit to share with you what you just heard from Tricia about how art in our world can really impact the lives of our students. This panel that you're about to hear from is going to share some experiences that I think is going to really elevate the way that you think about incorporating the A in STEAM, or the art in the classroom, or the classroom through the arts. All of these different ways that we mold our students and create experiences for our students need to be relevant, not only to the culture and the history of what our students are where they're coming from, but where they're going to and how they plan to share and explore. When you think about art, I mean, art is the tapestry of life. When you walk outside and you see the colors, or you walk outside and you hear the birds chirp, that's a way that we express and experience art. Our students, when they walk into our classrooms every day, they need even more of that particular sensation, that particular intentionality about what they're experiencing, what they're getting, and how they can make it into something that is their own. The three teachers that I'm about to introduce you to today are all fantastic. They all come from very different backgrounds in terms of what they teach, how they teach, and where they teach. You'll notice multiple different time zones being represented here and very different content areas and age groups. So at this point, I'd like us to go ahead and move to our slide with the four of us on there so I can give us a chance to introduce this fantastic panel of educators. We'll start with Jimmy Day from Colorado. Jimmy, can you just briefly introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Jimmy Day II. I'm the 2023 Colorado Teacher of the Year. I teach in the Aurora Public School District. I teach at Charles Burrell School of the Arts, K through 8 campus. I've been teaching middle school band for 15 years. And here in my 16th year, I'm going to add elementary to that. So I'm very excited about that. I also am a new teacher mentor in the district, and I also serve on the music advisory committee for the district as well. Thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jimmy. Dr. Mike.
Hey, good morning. Aloha, everybody. I'm Michael Ida. I'm the 2023 Hawaii State Teacher of the Year. I teach in the Hawaii Public Schools at Kalani High School. I teach math and computer science. This will be coming up on my 29th year of teaching. So thank you. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. And Ashley.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ashley Lockwood. I'm the 2023 Delaware Teacher of the Year. I am a 5th grade ELA and social studies teacher at Lulu Ross Elementary School in the Milford School District in Milford, Delaware. I am coming up on my 12th year of teaching. I teach ELA and social studies because I currently teach in the Spanish immersion program. So I have a partner teacher who teaches our 5th graders in Spanish, math, and science, and I take care of the ELA and social studies. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And I'm Michael Capito. I'm the 2023 Georgia Teacher of the Year. I spent most of my career teaching high school band. So I was teaching students through music and about music. and I'm currently serving in a role where I'm working on teacher recruitment and retention. And I also serve as the conductor of the Emory Wind Ensemble here in Atlanta at Emory University. Really excited to get into this conversation with you all today. And I'd like to start with you, Ashley, if that's all right. I know that you talked about how you're teaching in a certain grade band with many different content areas. Can you share with us and how do you use art in the classroom to further dive into history as a content area? Do you have any examples that you can share with us to help us?
I have a really nice example that I'm excited to highlight as far as what my grade level does. As a part of our language arts curriculum, our students are required to research a specific event from the civil rights movement. So we are very intentional about the events that we expose our students to. By the time they get to 5th grade, their knowledge of civil rights leaders are pretty much limited. They know about Martin Luther King, they know about Rosa Parks, and while they are very important civil rights leaders, we want our 5th graders to have an expanded knowledge of civil rights. So we expose them to events such as the Montgomery bus boycott, the Little Rock Nine, the Brown versus Board of Education court case, Greensboro lunch counter sit-ins. We want to expand their knowledge beyond what they've already learned. So our students are tasked with researching the event and producing a writing piece. But as an extension, a few years ago, my colleague, my teammate came to us and she said, we should do an art project. And so that year we began, our students were tasked with creating a model of a civil rights leader using a water bottle, similar to this or smaller. So they had to create a replica or a model of the civil rights leader of their choosing. The first year that we did it, it started out very basic, but as we've grown and as they've done it over the course of a few years, the projects have become so elaborate, and the students are responsible with bringing those civil rights leaders to life, so to speak. I think there might be a slide that shows a few examples of those. Maybe. So as we're finding it, we are in, I believe, our 3rd year of creating these projects. And it's really amazing to see our students bring these civil rights leaders to life. So they've studied them, of course, but they've looked at pictures, they've watched videos of the civil rights leader, and the attention to detail has been really amazing. We are so excited when our students are finally finished with the project and they bring it down the hallway and they pay so much close attention to the civil rights leader that we know exactly who it is when we see their project. So they're able to use any materials that they can get their hands on. They use styrofoam, they use felt, they use any type of materials to create clothing, to create props for their civil rights leader. And what was really cool about this school year was the projects were so elaborate and so amazing that we decided as a grade level team to showcase them, to put them on display. So we set them up in the gym of our school and allowed our other students in our building to walk through, other teachers. And we opened up the school to families so that they could also take a look at our civil rights projects.
Yeah, and what a fantastic project. I think it's the slide before this, actually. If we can go backwards one so we can see the outstanding, well, maybe not. There should be a slide in between those two that has all these fantastic water bottle art pieces. And as we're continuing to look for that particular slide, I think, Ashley, I'd like to ask you, I'm a musically inclined artist. I'm pretty good at the sounds, but if you were to tell me, this is a great idea for you to, do something visual or crafting, and I don't have a background in that, I know I would be intimidated by that particular prompt. Do you have a background in the arts? And if not, how did you gain the courage and skill set to facilitate something like this?
I do not have a background in the arts. And I am one of those people who has to see an example of what it is you're talking about. And I know a lot of our students are like that as well. One of my colleagues, the one who presented the idea, is very artistic by nature. So I think she gave us the confidence to present this project to our students and be able to help them, facilitate it at home. But if you're, some of our students are artistically inclined, and we encourage them to know that it's your interpretation of this civil rights leader. So whatever you can get your hands on can be turned into art. And that's what we really want to emphasize to our students, is that they're not all going to look the same, and that is okay. But you are using your own interpretation and your materials to bring it to life. So we definitely encourage creativity on all levels.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. We do have a question in the chat about this particular project. Are these art supplies free and available for students? Do they purchase their own? How do you facilitate that particular part of the experience?
We give the project to our students and their families to work on. So the project is actually worked on at home. One of the things that you have to know your students. You have to know that everyone may not have all of the same resources or access to the same resources. So as a school, you may have to help some students out with getting the materials and putting it together. But there are students who are able to find things at home, a quick trip to the dollar store. We definitely give them different outlets, different ways to go about handling the project. So we do not provide everything for the students, but we definitely know our students and know who might need some extra support.
And I think, that's such a great point of knowing who you're talking to and who you're working with, making sure they have exactly what they need to make something like this come to life. That's amazing, Ashley. Thank you for that. And, we're talking about, that was kind of a history itself, tied to the arts. Dr. Mike, I kind of want to talk to you about you teaching a completely different content area than Ashley or Jimmy or myself do, but you're still finding ways to make sure that, we live in sometimes a silo world of different subject areas. But STEM came around and kind of married a few things together. And then the invention of STEAM came to be, which includes the arts in this. How do you in your classroom put the A in STEAM?
Sure, thank you. So, like Ashley, I don't have any formal training in art, but I've always been an admirer of art. I've been an appreciator of art, visual arts, musical arts, performing arts. So when the acronym STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, when that evolved to include the A for arts, so it became STEAM, I was actually really happy about that, excited about that. So for me, I come from, kind of two different contexts that people don't normally associate with art. I come from, the math, computer science. That's what I teach, during the day. And I also come from a place, Hawaii, which, people, there's a lot of artistic currents there that people may not be necessarily aware of. So kind of two perspectives. From the STEAM perspective, there's a lot of ways that the two are symbiotic, the technology part versus the arts. On the one hand, people don't normally associate STEM subjects with art, but there's actually a really strong creative element, especially in computer science. For kids, especially who don't normally see themselves as, quote unquote, artistic in the traditional sense, being able to express their creativity through, designing a website or designing an animation of a game. That actually gives them kind of a really creative outlet, and it gives us an opportunity to explore, things like color theory, how to do effective graphic design. So there's a lot of interplay between the two. In math also, we don't normally think of math as necessarily artistic, but in a subject, for example, like geometry, it's very visual. There's a lot of opportunity for that. And in Hawaii, because of our kind of unique geographic and cultural history and perspective, we kind of put a different slant on it. A lot of our kids the majority of my kids are AA and HPI, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander. And their orientation, their perspective, their awareness is more kind of towards Asia than it is towards necessarily a European perspective. So for a lot of our kids, things like anime or origami, things that are more kind of Eastern focused, gives us a way to incorporate art kind of in a more cultural and historically oriented, and a more kind of a more in keeping with our demographics, our history, our population, than might be with things that are more necessarily European oriented. So there's actually a lot of ways that I incorporate art and kind of that awareness and that creativity aspect of it, especially in particular, to my classes.
And I think, Dr. Mike, that's such a fantastic example of being creative as an educator about how to connect some of these dots. You're connecting culture and art and creativity and computer science and math all into one beautiful puzzle that comes together nicely. Do you have any examples or stories about students that, I know for me, I loved certain subjects and I didn't love other subjects. And for me, I wonder if there was an approach that a teacher took that might have changed my mind. Do you have any students that maybe weren't big into math or computer science until you shared some of that magic?
Sure, yeah. There's a lot of kids who take my introductory to computer science class who may not necessarily be into so much the programming aspect, but they're interested in like animation and games and things. So they don't think of themselves initially as tech people, but when they learn that, especially when you design things like animation and games, you do have that kind of really creative element and that opportunity to learn about artistic ideas like color schemes and so forth. It gives them really kind of an outlet to see that, oh yeah, in this medium that you don't normally think of as being necessarily artistic, it's not the canvas and paints, but it's a graphical palette. They can be as creative and artistic and give rise to a lot of really interesting things. And a lot of the influence, as I mentioned, comes from kind of a more Asia-focused, Pacific-focused perspective. So a lot of kids will bring things like anime, those types of that style and that design into their creations. So it gives kids an opportunity to experience, I guess, creativity in a medium that they don't normally associate with being especially creative.
Absolutely. And I think that the world needs more of that. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I think hopefully you're going to inspire even more teachers to take that leap into that particular space. Now, kind of reverse designing this, going to Jimmy. I know as an arts teacher, it's so easy for us as arts teachers to be like, the product has to be beautiful, perfect, this and that. But it's also important for us as arts teachers to make sure that we're teaching history through our own medium. Can you talk a little bit about how you connect your content area to history and some examples of how you make that all work together?
Yes. Well, there's a couple, 2 or 3 ways that I do it. I like to have my students research their instrument. They play these instruments day in and day out, and they listen to Mr. Day say, play it this way, play it that way, but they don't really have an idea where all this originated from. So that's one thing I like to make them do, is to go back and research how their instrument even came to be, and all of the evolution that it's going through, and why the instrument looks the way it looks now versus how it looked when it was first introduced way, way back a long time ago. So that's one of the things, and it helps them get more of an appreciation for their instrument because they understand it now. They saw the evolution of the instrument, so they just kind of became just one with this instrument that they're playing every day. They know some couple facts of history behind it, how it came to. As a student, I didn't have the pleasure of really researching my instrument until I got to college. And from that point, I'm a euphonium player. Never knew how it started and, the variations of this instrument. But then once I started looking it up, I started to appreciate the value of that instrument much more than I have always done in my childhood. So I like to put that on my students so they can really just see the evolution of that. Another way I like to do it, I like for them to also research someone who played their instrument, right? And it's great that they do that because they get to research all of these people who played their instruments and You know, they get to see the Dizzy Gillespie's, they get to see the Herbie Hancocks, and you know, they get to see all these people who played their instrument, the John Philip Sousas, and everybody who played their instrument, and they like, you know, it's like, oh wow, oh wow, oh, I didn't know they played it. And on top of that, they get to see people who look like them that also played their instrument. And that gives them more an appreciation as well. Another thing, gender-based. You know, I have girl tuba players, and it's great for them to look up female tuba players and see, like, yeah, you know, tuba is not just for boys. Or I have a female percussionist, and she can look up a percussionist instrumentist that's a female as well and realize, oh, dang, all drums ain't for boys. Or I have last year I had 6 flute players, 5 of them were boys. So I like for them to look up other male flute players and just be like, okay, so flute is not a girl instrument, or clarinet is not a girl instrument. So I like to do it on that end too, so it could kind of be a nice little representation of what they do. A third way that I like to do it is I did this assignment during COVID when we were online and had to teach. I will always have them to research the evolution of hip hop, because they listen to all this hip hop now, but they don't know the evolution of it. They don't know where it started, who began. You know, they get to know the 80s, what was happening in the 80s. They get to know what was happening, you know, when hip hop first started. So now, on top of them learning this genre of music and learning evolution, they learned what was happening in the 80s, the drugs and, you know, the gangs and the graffiti, the breakdance, and like all these things that was going on. They get to learn about all this stuff on top of them learning the evolution of hip hop to what they're listening to today. So that is those like 3 of the main ways that I like to really, you know, link the past and the present to, you know, for history with what my students are doing.
Yeah, and Jimmy, you've given us so many different nuggets of areas that we can chop at to try to make sure that our students are able to see all these connections, see themselves in the musical experience. And one of my favorite things that you said was develop a better appreciation for the art form itself. I know for me, when I'm watching a television show, I'm watching something that's got different types of music because it's from a different period, I have a stronger understanding and appreciation because of the knowledge base that I've gotten. I've always tried to share that particular experience with my students. One of my favorite concerts that I ever programmed for my students was called Scenes from Home. And I tried my best to make sure, or actually, we actually achieved this. I made sure that every single student in my ensemble got to play a piece of music written by a composer that looked like them and had a similar background to them. And, you know, I just thought it was a good thing because I wanted to make sure that my students got that experience. And I thought it'd be a one and done kind of experience. But after that, every single concert, my students were going home and doing research on the composers of every single piece of music that was in front of them. So that example, Jimmy, about, you know, tuba's not a blank instrument. Flute's not a blank instrument.
Right.
I want to be able to see Dizzy Gillespie and Phil Smith playing instruments. We want to be able to see all of these different connections. And the good thing about being an arts teacher is that we have that flexibility, that autonomy. But I think what we're noticing in the world of education, Ashley, I'm going to ask you about this particular concept. I think we're seeing some states, some areas having a movement towards a more scripted curriculum, things that are I was talking to some future educators the other day, and the biggest question they had for us was, how do I make teaching fun when I have to read from the script? So Ashley, what's your advice for teachers, either young or old, about how do I incorporate these artistic creative outlets into something that's becoming so scripted?
I agree. We are definitely bound to our scripted curriculums. We're bound to our pacing guides and making sure we're getting all of the things done before the end of the school year. And that doesn't leave us a lot of time for artistic creativities in our general education classrooms. I think we have to highlight all of the things that Dr. Mike talked about, Jimmy talked about, I talked about, all of the benefits to doing lessons like this. For example, the lesson with the water bottles and creating the civil rights models. I see my students shine in a way that I typically don't get to see. There are students who may not, there are the pictures. There are students who you may not hear them say 5 words all school year, but when they come in with their projects, you see like all of this creativity that they've put into it. That is something we as teachers and administrators need to advocate for in our districts. Look what our kids can do. Everyone learns a different way. Their learning styles are different. Obviously, their output is going to be different, and we have to figure out a way to learn our students' learning style and their output style so that every student is able to demonstrate what they've learned using the arts. And I feel like that is something that we as teachers really have to advocate for. We have to show our administrators projects like this and talk about what Jimmy talked about and Dr. Mike talked about so that they can see our students are learning, they're producing just in an artistic way.
Yeah, Michael, if I could also dovetail on what Ashley said, math and CS especially, I think people think of those as especially scripted. Maybe not in the sense that, you have a script and you actually read it literally, but the curriculum is full. And oftentimes, we don't reach the end necessarily at the end of the year. But I think it's incumbent upon us as teachers, when push comes to shove and when the classroom door closes, you're the one who is going to be interacting with the kids. And so, you have your pacing guide, you have your curriculum map, but at the end of the day, I think it's incumbent upon us as teachers to try to find ways using our creativity and our knowledge and our experience to find ways of, inserting opportunities for kids to be creative and to express themselves in ways that are not necessarily traditional to our subject. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a big project. It can be, small things here and there day by day. But I think it's part of our challenge and our vocation as teachers to do that for our kids because they benefit enormously from that.
We are in the field, the space of learning. And I think as teachers, we have to be willing to learn and grow and create these experiences and opportunities for our students too. Innovation in education comes from people taking some risks and pushing the envelope a little bit and creating these opportunities to, like what we see on the screen with Ashley's project for these students is another great example of this. Dr. Mike, I'd like to kick it back to you just for a little bit more follow-up on the concept of not every student loves art or painting or folding or sculpting. Not every student wants to sing or dance or act. In your classroom, what other types of ways do you allow students to grow and express through art and your content area?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, it's every student is different, as we know, and every student has their individual likes and preferences. Not every student's gonna want to be in math class or is excited necessarily about taking CS. But I think it's getting to know your kids. It's the relationship building, which we know is kind of the foundation of everything. Everything comes from that. But getting to know your kids, getting to know, what their likes and dislikes are, their hobbies, what they would like to do outside of school. And just finding a way for them to express that, low bar so that they don't have to necessarily do a presentation in front of the whole class. They can do it in a way that suits their personality and in small ways, not necessarily big projects, but in little ways. If they're doing a group project and they want to be the one, if they're more artistic, then into the coding part. And if they want to be the ones who are doing the animations, doing the avatars, designing the sprites and things, that's a way for them to express their creativity, the artistic element in the subject, without necessarily having to be put on the spot and put under the spotlight.
Yeah, I think we all have those experiences. I can see my classroom, all the classrooms that I've taught right now, of the student that wants to be the figurehead of the group project and the person that does not want to say a word or share what they've created. But that does not mean that our students don't want to learn to express. It does not mean that our students don't want the chance to create. We used to do a project in my classrooms called The Song of Your Generation, where I would allow my students to pick a song that they thought described their generation. And their job was, we would make it into like a March Madness bracket. And the students would basically create compelling arguments on why they thought the song was the song of the generation. We would go through and they would vote, but some students would make a flyer for it, a visual art piece to explain why this was the song. Some of them would give a nice speech that would rally the troops and make them really excited about that particular song. There are so many different ways that those students got to express, but like you said, Mike, we have to make sure that we understand who our students are and give them the space to be comfortable to explore. Learning, if we want to train our students to just be able to answer the questions, that's one thing. But if we want to teach our students to become fantastic learners and explorers and growers and leaders, we have to give them the space to experience in the way that makes them feel the most comfortable. And with all of these ideas, we've got so many opportunities for us in our classrooms, but I'm a little bit curious about how you, this is something like what Ashley talked about earlier. Someone came to her with an idea that they spearheaded together and made into something beautiful. But how do we incorporate what we do in our classroom with other teachers that might feel a little bit of resistance or hesitance or apprehension? How are we collaborating across our school buildings to make sure that every student in our space is getting the experience that they deserve? Jimmy, do you have any experiences with letting your art form, the thing that you're doing in your classroom, expand outside of just the band room?
Unfortunately, I have not been able to be in that situation where, and maybe it has, maybe I have some inspiration that's not being told to me, but as far as me being hands-on with that, I have not been able to do it. But I am excited that Charles Burrell, the school that I will be starting next year, is really, really honing down on arts in the classroom, and it's the gen ed teachers is collaborating with the arts teachers, you know, with the theater teacher, with your dance teacher, with your music teachers. So I'm excited to really dive into that and see where that takes us. But I will say, although maybe I have not known it to go outside of my classroom, I know as a student I was, you know, affected by that because from probably the band director that was at my school then, because I had a math teacher in elementary school who was teaching us multiplication tables, simple multiplication tables. We were learning the eights, 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3. It got to 8 times 8. And the only reason why Mr. Day know 8 times 8 is 64 is because she used to always sing this little rhyme with it. 8 times 8 is 64. Shut your mouth and don't say no more. And that little rhyme right there is hilarious. As hilarious as it is, as a 43-year-old, I can tell you that 8 times 8 is 64. But in the back of my mind, I hear shut your mouth and don't say no more. But something that simple that she probably took from the vocal teacher or took from the band teacher and incorporated in her class. I can speak and say I am a product of arts being in the classroom because here I am, I can, you know, just something not over the top, no composition, no performance. It's just a little rhyme that 64 and more went together. And she put some words in between and made it cute. Something that simple really, really helped me out. So yeah, like I said, maybe going outside my classroom, maybe that was something, but it just wasn't told to me. But I am a product of having arts in the classroom. Just that one little thing helped. And there was many more things, but that is the one thing that stuck out. But yeah, I'm very excited to do that at School of the Arts this year.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that it depends where you are in terms of what school you're in. It depends where you are in terms of your comfort level to be willing to knock on somebody's door and say, hey, I've got a crazy idea. Just hear me out. And then and run with it. And I think having the ability to have that collegiality, that camaraderie, and then that conviction to go for it is something that is really exciting for your teachers to learn, but also something exciting for your students to experience. Because like you said, that's a times table that is relatively difficult for a young person. And just a few years later, Jimmy, you've got 8 times 8 is 64, among other things, and that's great. Ashley, you've got a lot of experience of working across your department with other teachers in the arts. How do you set up those relationships to make it fluid and collaborative?
Similar to what Jimmy was saying, I think exposure is very important to make it collaborative. We as teachers do great things in our classroom all the time. And it could be something small as putting your art project or whatever creative project outside of your classroom, hanging up on the walls outside of your classroom, so everyone has to walk by and see it, and that sparks ideas with other teachers. So I think just showcasing what you do in your classroom, allowing others to see it, and they can take it or they could make it their own, but exposure is definitely important. So when you're doing creative things in your classroom or on your grade level, find a way to share it with the people in your building, the people in your district. Other people have to see what you're doing because exposure is important. So I think that's a really great way of sharing and collaborating.
Yeah, it's the best way to kind of take some of those ideas is to just steal them from other people and to get inspired by what your neighbors are doing. I know, like, one of my favorite pastimes is just scrolling through social media and seeing my friends that are also teachers doing things that I haven't thought of and or things that I have not been brave enough to try. And the thing that I think we all have to remember as teachers is what we hopefully are trying to instill in our students, in the sense that I'm asking you to do your very best, and you're going to learn something today, whether you like it or not. Sometimes it's going to be a learning through triumph, and sometimes it's going to be learning through some deficiencies being highlighted. But either way, that exposure that you talked about, Ashley, is really, really important. Dr. Mike, do you have any ideas around that particular topic?
Sure, that's a great question. I think a lot of times, at least for me, I found that those collaborative relationships are really formed sort of informally. And when I approach the art teacher and want to start to do some collaboration, oftentimes I find, approaching with a mindset of being a lifelong learner is really helpful to kind of establish that relationship. I have a question, go approach with a question. Can you share with me a little bit about how you teach, color theory? Or how do you get kids to be creative in your class? And just kind of that approaching with curiosity and with the mindset of a lifelong learner, I found it often helps to really kind of open the door to establishing those relationships collaboratively.
Yeah, I think that's great. That being inquisitive is a big part of being able to collaborate. And I think that's really cool. We've had some questions in the chat about specific connections between multiple areas. And I think you've talked about color theory and how that can work with different art form content areas. Ashley, you talked about history and art form arts connecting together. And Jimmy, you've talked a little bit about some ideas on how you've experienced as a student connecting some of those dots. Does anyone have any specific curricula content areas where you could think of a time where you connected with another teacher using the arts besides what we've talked about so far? I know that's a really meta question for us to think about. As you think about it, in some of my experiences, we always did a Veterans Day performance in our particular school. And that was an experience where it would be the band, the choir, visual arts, pottery, theater, drama, and dance all combined together to create some big showcase. And it used to be an experience where we would just play a song, next group come on stage, do a dance, next group come on stage. But we decided to incorporate our literature classes into the experience, to write some of the script for the drama program, to incorporate stories through history. We also had a couple of experiences where we would have the band would play a tune while the dance team would do a dance, and then connecting those particular fibers together in collaboration. Any ideas on different ways that you can just unmute yourself and jump in, that you've created those experiences with your teams?
The music teacher at our school is very intentional about.
Go ahead.
Okay. She's very intentional about asking us what it is we're teaching and she tries to incorporate that into her music lessons. So as we were learning about the civil rights movement, she incorporated music from that time. During Black History Month, she was intentional about incorporating Black music, like jazz and things like that. So not even just teachers on our team, but teachers across our building, our music teacher, our art teacher, having them know what it is we're teaching so that they can also incorporate that into our lessons has been very beneficial for our students.
That is awesome. I love that inquisitiveness that Mike was talking about a second ago. Your music teacher seems to have that bug too. Jimmy, I thought I heard you saying something there.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so and like I said, it's really my collaboration with the other art students. I know other arts teachers, but I know that there was a Black History play coming up, and they did this Michael Jackson thing from him being a kid to all the way to being an adult. And so I know I assisted with teaching the choreography for, when they were the Little Jackson 5, and just, teaching the kids the choreography so they could present it, and had the had the fun time of being the actual Michael Jackson when he became an adult, and I was able to perform that for the student body and stuff like that. So, but the theater teacher was involved, the choir teacher was involved. And then you had a couple other teachers around the school who volunteered to put this whole program together.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that all of us can relate to how that can create such great bonding within a team of teachers on a faculty. My final question for us before we get into the chat question is for all three of you to answer. And my question is this: if I'm feeling nervous, apprehensive, unsure of where to start on this journey of incorporating the arts into my content area as a key text in my classroom, what's the piece of advice or what's the first step that I should take to make my experience for my students richer? What's the piece of advice, or what is the strategy for that teacher that is feeling ready to make the leap, but unsure where? Dr. Mike, I will put you on the spot first. Sorry, / you're welcome.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so for me, it's getting started in small ways, not necessarily with a big grand project. But looking day by day, not necessarily even a complete daily lesson, maybe just a small place here and there where you can kind of insert just opportunities for kids to be creative. It can be really, so it could be visual arts, it could be writing, expressing themselves through writing, creatively. Anything where you can kind of just start to open up a space for kids to be creative and to express themselves in ways that are not necessarily think of traditional 2-year subject. But for me, it's in small ways. And, as a teacher, try to learn about, my own creativity and how you can kind of leverage that and your knowledge of kids to find ways that can just bring it in small ways. And, from there you can expand and you can get more ambitious with your projects and your assignments. But for me, it's kind of small ways of thinking about the community.
I'm going to push you a little bit more, Dr. Mike. I'm sorry. I just know you're so brilliant. And I'm curious could you give me like the top of your mind thought of what is one small thing that a teacher could do creatively? You gave a couple of small examples, but could you give me a little bit more specificity of this is a small thing that I could do tomorrow?
Sure. I mean, for me, I'm big into reflection, journaling. And so, having kids just do a quick 5-minute reflection every day, where they kind of just express what their feelings are for the day. And then using that, as I read those, and I notice, things that kids will share with me through those. It's looking for ways of, for example, a kid shared with me that they really like to write. They're actually her ambition was to, write the great American novel. And so she's really creative in that sense, writing. And so we found a way to create an assignment, kind of like a choose your own adventure game, where she was able to, express that creativity that I would have really never have known of if she hadn't shared that with me through kind of like a daily reflection. So it's giving kids voice, and then ultimately that voice, you can use that and leverage that to give them choice.
Oh, that's beautiful. Man, talk about wonderful wordsmithing that you just did to explain a concept that I think resonates with all of us. Thank you for that, Dr. Mike. Jimmy, any thoughts on that particular idea of how do you take that first step? What's the strategy or the inspiration that you can share with these teachers on this call to help them?
First thing is don't overthink it, right? You know, we as teachers have the habit of overthinking stuff. And as you stated earlier, Michael, that it's around us. It's around us. So it just sometimes it just comes from looking around the room or listening to something to help inspire you. But yeah, just don't overthink it. It's very simple, like Dr. Michael said. It's just something very simple. Figure out how to put it in. Just incorporate it. Hey, what's your response? Draw a picture as to how you feel. Hey, while we were journaling this morning, if you want to, one of the choices, make up a song, 3 stanza song as to how you feel this morning. Just something that simple that students like to do, you know. But yeah, it's just don't overthink it. And like Dr. Michael said, just start in small increments. You don't have to make it in like a big part of your lesson, but just make it as a form of execution to what you're trying to get your students to do.
Yeah, and I think that vulnerability is huge, and that starting in scale is huge too. Your first experience with this as a teacher is probably not going to be painting the mural on the side of the building as an art project. That's probably not the place to start, but finding those smaller projects that students can do and feel willing and able to express, not necessarily perform, is, I think, a really good part of what you just were talking about, Jimmy. And Ashley.
I think collaboration is key. With great teaching, you are encouraged to collaborate with others. Other teachers have inspired me to do, step outside of my box with my students and encourage their creativity. Like I talked about before, my music teacher is an awesome resource. An art teacher is an awesome resource, and just other teachers in your building. So you can definitely get inspired by the people who are around you. So reach out to those other teachers and you guys can come up with something together to do for your students.
That's a beautiful testament. I think that beautifully wraps up what we've been talking about today. I still continuously think about how much art is embedded into our world, even when we aren't thinking about it or looking at it or being intentional about it. Just the colors on the wall, that's art. The sounds on the street, that's art. And it boils itself up to the surface into really, really refined ways as well. And part of our job as educators is to make sure our students can understand and appreciate the world around them. So as teachers, whether we're starting small and we're building and taking that leap of faith, as teachers, whether we're walking across the hallway and collaborating with our team or just creating those experiences inside of our classroom, I think it's important for all of us to continuously strive to make the experience as beautiful as possible. And that's how we leverage art as a key text in our classrooms. I know I'm thankful for the time of our fantastic panelists here with Ashley, Jimmy, and Dr. Mike. I hope that you feel like you've received some insight to help you, whether you're continuing to use art in your classroom or you're about to take the very first step. I hope that you got some strategies and resources and confidence to do it, because you deserve it and your students do too. So thank you so much for the time today. Thank you, Smithsonian, for leveraging arts as part of what we do. And I'm going to turn it back over to Trisha Edwards. All right. Well, I guess Trisha had to jump off the call, but thank you so much for having us. We hope these tips are helpful for you as you continue your journey in inspiring the future through education.